Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming to the panel this afternoon. Just a reminder before we get started, if you guys could please put your phones away and put them on silent, please. And if you have any laptops out, to put those away too, please and thanks. So the panel's going to be Q&A style, and we have our two guests here, and after we go through our questions, if there's time left, then we'll take some questions from the audience as well. So next to me, we have Susan Milana. She's the Regional Director of Human Resources at Newcastle Hotels and Resorts. And next to her, we have Shauna Quinlan, Consultant and Executive Recruitment Team Lead at Knightsbridge Robertson Surrett Home. So we're going to start off with please introducing yourself and telling us a bit about the company you work for in your position.
So my name is Susan, and I work with Newcastle. Oh, thank you. My name is Susan, and I work with Newcastle Hotels and Resorts. So we're a management company for hospitality industry. So we have hotels and resorts. So we have 6 properties currently in the Canadian region. So I am based out of the Westin Nova Scotia, which was our very first hotel in the Canadian region. And so now we also have the Hampton Inns and Suites at Dartmouth Crossing. We manage on behalf of the province of Nova Scotia, the Digby Pines Resort, as well as Liscombe Resort. We have 2 properties in New Brunswick, so we have a focus service property, the Residence Inn in Moncton, and we also have the Algonquin Resort in St. Andrews by the Sea. And we're currently building a new property. So depending on how you want to count it, it will either count for 1 or 2 properties at Dartmouth Crossing, because we're building a new hotel, but it's a double branded hotel. So literally one tower is going to be a Residence Inn. The other tower is going to be a Courtyard by Marriott. So you go one way, you go to one hotel, you go the other way, and it's another hotel. We have in total about 25 properties between US and Canada. And my apologies, I have forgotten our newest member of the team. We are now managing also the Westin Prince in Toronto. So that's our portfolio in Canada. I've been with the team for 16 years now. So joined the team when there was only the 1 property, and so we continue to grow, so lots of excitement.
Hi everyone, I'm Shauna and I work at Knightsbridge Robertson Surrett, as Holly mentioned. I know Dr. Wieglin from St. Mary's University. I did my master's with Dr. Kevin Kellaway there in industrial organizational psychology. I did my undergraduate degree at Memorial University, which is where I'm originally from Newfoundland. And Knightsbridge Robertson Surrett, for those who aren't familiar with the company, it's a company that's often known for recruitment, which is the sphere that I sit in at the firm. But we also do human resources consulting, as well as career transition as well, and leadership solutions. So for executives who are transitioning careers, we'll support them in our career transition practice. Human resources consulting as well. We have associates who work in that field. But myself, I'm most familiar with the recruitment specific side of things in terms of working there anyways. So I've been there for about 4 years. I started in a research-oriented role and moved into a recruiter role, started managing the team there, and started working with my own clients as well. So I've been fortunate to progress along and get a variety of experiences from there. Yeah, I think that is a very quick overview about me.
Great. So question 2 is, in order to have my resume get past the first review process, what are the key things you look for? What skills and attributes do you look for most in an application package?
So to expand, I guess, a little bit on that before I dive into the answer. So with executive recruitment, we work with a variety of different clients. So we work and support them in their recruitment efforts. So we're essentially the facilitator of the recruitment process for them. So they'll engage us to help support them throughout their recruitment process. So we work with universities, we work with all sorts of companies in the private sector and general public sector, so nonprofits, government, and so forth, to find the employees that they're looking for. On the executive search side, which is more specifically where I sit in the firm, is working primarily with executives, so hiring for director level and above. So we search for deans of universities, presidents of universities, directors and chairs, and also kind of CEOs, CFOs of companies. So a wide range of industries. So I've worked in everything in recruitment from engineering and IT through to human resources and everything kind of in between. But I also do internal recruitment for our firm as well when I stepped into the team management role. So I also hire for recruiters and for executive search coordinators and research coordinators for our firm. So more, they would be my more kind of entry-level recruitment roles that I would hire is for our internal firm. So two different angles, I guess, I come at recruitment with. So in terms of resume and getting past the first interview process, ultimately kind of stepping back a step. It's every position, of course, if we're looking for a president, things I'm looking for are going to be a little different than if I'm looking for a recruiter to join our firm. So it really depends on what the position is that we're looking to hire for. And kind of from the front end of the recruitment process, typically it's internally or as part of the search committee, there's a decision and conversation around what does the ideal candidate profile look like. So what are the criteria we're looking for in a candidate? What is the education that leads to success for this kind of role? What is the experience that the individual will need? So typically those things, if there is a job advertisement for the position, they're great clues because we're kind of putting that out there and sharing that about what the things are that we're looking for. So ensuring you're highlighting those elements, specific to that role in your application would be what I would recommend. But typically, if I were to generalize across, president right through to an entry-level role would be, typically education is something that, is of topic that we're looking for. So a degree is always valued for the most all roles I look for. They are looking for someone with a degree, an undergraduate degree, and oftentimes, depending on the position, a master's or higher level degree will be preferred, again, depending on the role. Not always required, but a degree is definitely very valuable, so good on you guys for being here. And in terms of other things, again, the experience will really vary depending on what the role is that you're looking for, but kind of matching, again, the experience that the role requires is the other thing that we look for. So sometimes experience outweighs education for a particular role. So they might be okay that someone would have an undergraduate degree rather than a master's degree because they have a significant amount of experience. So it's a kind of a case-by-case basis. And for other roles as well, all of the other elements of your application, so the extracurricular activities, if you're involved in clubs and societies, and right through to board experience, external to university that you might be involved in and volunteer, all of those things really count and shows kind of a well-rounded application because it's not just kind of education and experience that are the two main buckets. There's kind of that other category, which personally for the internal positions that we hire for, I value that very strongly. I strongly look at kind of that volunteer and engagement in university shows that you kind of can balance multiple priorities in your educational studies at the same time as being involved and engaged in your university community. So they would be things that I would look for if I were to answer that in a roundabout way.
So similar, we have different groups. So when you talk about management positions, those we do handle slightly differently from our hourly line positions. So we talk about the management positions first of all. Usually there's going to be some sort of ad that is out there. So In today's world, very rare to have paper ads. We all tend to do the online ads because, let's face it, first of all, most of them are free. So free is always better than paying for something. But we still do have some vehicles where we do pay. So whether it be H Careers, because of course H Careers is really hospitality focused. We recruit on LinkedIn as well. So, you know, those are some areas where you would see some of those postings. So pull that information off of those postings in terms of what are the key requirements that we're looking for. I'm a firm believer that when you're looking at those management roles, that put a cover letter on there. Make it super easy for me to figure out how you fit with the specific requirements of the position. So if I'm looking for 5 years of food and beverage experience and you've got that, or you've got 5+ years, put that right on your cover letter so that I can basically check off the boxes really quickly, even before I look at your resume, that you've got kind of the key requirements. You know, that's kind of my first scan. Once I kind of look at the initial cover letter, then I'm going to look at the detail of the resume, and let's see what specifically is in the details. So if we talk about food and beverage experience, for instance, does the person have hotel and resort experience? Because that's very different from a standalone restaurant where I'm going to say the rules and policies are typically going to be very different than a corporate type of environment, and they're absolutely run differently. So depending on the type of experience, again, that will dovetail in hopefully with what you're applying for. So now in today's world, when you talk about some of the hourly positions or the line positions when you're first starting out, it is really different from those management positions. So we have an online application system. So that means you're going to enter your information on that online application, and some companies will actually have an algorithm within their programs that will run, and they'll rank your resume or whatever information you've put in there as to how good a match you are. Ours doesn't do that, but we have some pre-screen questions that we will ask you based on the position that you have applied for. So again, we're going to take a look and see what the fit is. So it's a little bit more difficult when you're doing an online application to really kind of highlight where your perfect fit is, and to have us take a look at your resume. So then what you really want to make sure you do is fine-tune what you're putting into those applications so that there is as close a fit as possible. And you may want to, for instance, if your food and beverage experience is from a couple of years ago and you have some more recent experience, but it's not directly applicable, you might choose to kind of leave some of that information out or minimize that information so that the system will really pick up on your directly applicable experience and we can easily see that. You know, so make kind of that job that isn't applicable a 1 or 2 liner, and make the positions that are applicable kind of the 4 or 5 liners so that we can really see that. You know, that's how we're going to really, on that first scan, because the biggest challenge is you don't have much time to impress when we're looking through resumes. And I don't know about you, but sometimes when you have a posting that goes out there, sometimes you can have 100+ resumes that come in for a specific position. So how are you going to impress? And so it's about fine-tuning all of that information and make yourself that fit that we're looking for.
What type of positions should recent graduates or students graduating soon be looking for when applying? What position titles or roles are considered entry-level jobs?
So I think this really comes back to, again, an individual basis. So I'm not going to go and tell everyone to go out and look for a sales associate job and have you all scrambling searching sales associate. So I think it really means that each individual kind of has to take a step back, and I'm sure everyone has their own career interests and school interests and what you're studying. So similar to when you go start looking for work, you want to think about, okay, so what have I learned in university? What are the you know, what are the values that I have, and what kind of work environment do I want to be in? Is it, you know, giving back to the community? Do you want to work in a nonprofit, or are you kind of entrepreneurial and you want to work in a business and a startup? So thinking about, you know, taking the time to stand back and think about what's important to you and where you want to take your career, and kind of framing some sort of roadmap from there. It doesn't have to be exact, and no one kind of ever knows their steps along the way that they're going to take, and oftentimes people are surprised by the careers that they end up in. So, but taking some time from the front end to at least start to assess yourself and get to know what drives you, what motivates you, I think will be an important first step. And I always like to think of like your career as a toolbox. So, you know, you may not know exactly where you're going, but, you know, if you're looking to be a nonprofit, then maybe you want to start volunteering at a nonprofit while you're in school, or starting off if there's no, you know, current position available while you're working on something else. So starting to kind of dip your toe in whatever way you can, and kind of growing your toolbox, or kind of getting those experiences that will ultimately provide you with everything that you need to succeed in the position you're looking for. So whether that be leadership opportunities, or opportunities to you know, manage multiple projects, coordinate an event, think about those things and what are ways, and then think, okay, what job is that I need to do to gain that tool from my toolbox. You know, generally, I guess, you know, internships, co-ops, sometimes they'll list internships even though you're done your program, but some programs list internships. I think RBC lists internships, don't quote me on that, but after you graduate, those internships can sometimes turn into full-time opportunities as well. Some actually list them as new grad or entry-level roles, so you can search for those things. I'm sure, or perhaps your Career Center has a website portal maybe that they post advertisements as well, so kind of that's a good indication, because if an employer is posting there, they're probably understanding that the market of people looking at those ads is going to be students, and so therefore meaning that they're open to students. So that's a good place to look, because typically, again, people that post the word would be open to more people who may not necessarily have a lot of work experience coming out of university. Generally, you know, if I were to put titles on it, I would say, again, like customer service representative or client service representative, coordinator, analyst. You know, if you want to be an insurance claims, maybe claims adjuster, sales associate, marketing assistant, research coordinator in the case of our firm, or even recruiter. So kind of those are titles that are typically ring to be more entry-level titles, I would say, but really it's impossible for me to sit down and tell you exactly what title to apply for. It really it depends on your individual interests and what you're looking for. So kind of going back to the start and tuning into yourself and what that is, I think is important.
Yeah, and I think that definitely one of the challenges is to figure out what type of industry you want to be in. Because when you talk about, for instance, human resources, I graduated with a BCom specializing in HR, and I've been in a number of different types of industries, and they're very, very different. My first job was actually in a leasing company. Couldn't get that first HR job. You know, you go into a program when everybody is getting a job, and then because we all went in there, all of a sudden, you know, all of those positions are taken up. So I went into a leasing company and kind of built a career there as a customer service rep, as funnily enough, as an opening position. And then really kind of went into that training role. And so in the leasing company, really dynamic, really busy, but you know, that was part of the financial industry. And because we were with a company called First City Trust. And so I eventually moved into kind of the corporate training side of things. And all of a sudden, this really dynamic position that I had, and I, you know, built a position for myself where I was out training other customer service reps in the field to going into the corporate world. And then suddenly it wasn't as dynamic. Suddenly I'm sitting at a desk, I'm doing a whole lot of paperwork, working on workbooks, arranging training. So even within one industry, depending on the type of position you have within the same kind of realm, it could be absolutely night and day. Mining company where I had absolutely no interaction with any associates. It was really kind of the corporate people because it was the payroll and the HR department that I worked with. Again, a different dynamic. I've worked in retail where it's a mixture of the operations and a mixture of HR. And so there is no 2 days that are ever the same. And that for me was something that I really enjoyed. And so when I made the transition into hospitality, it was a perfect fit for me because it was the same sort of world where no 2 days are ever the same. So you really have to kind of figure out, first of all, where you want to be in terms of industry. I was in mining, and again, hardly ever dealt with any associates. It was with corporate office, because that's where I was. And I learned very quickly that that wasn't something that I wanted to do. I wanted to have a lot of interaction with people, and that wasn't going to give it to me. So first of all, industry, and within the industry, the type of position and the amount of interaction that you're going to have. And so in my industry, there typically is a lot of interaction with people. So if you talk about my role, we have 265 associates, for instance, at the Westin. So there's a lot of interaction. In my role, I get to interact with people at all of the other properties as well. I get to go out and I facilitate training for the resort properties. So I get to know those associates. So for me, I absolutely love that component about my job. I love being able to say, I know those people at the resort properties. And so the difficulty, though, is that, how do you get there? When you come into our industry, a lot of the positions are those line positions. So if you tell me I want to be a housekeeping supervisor, typically what we're going to do is we're going to look at your resume. We're going to see whether you have any experience working as a room attendant, working as a housekeeping houseperson. We want you to have that base so that when you're talking to your associates and you're saying, please do whatever, you're talking from a knowledge base, because in our industry, it's very specific in terms of how you do things. And so we're always looking for people that have that experience. So if that's your goal in our industry, then my advice to you is going to be, for those summer positions, go out and be in some of those hourly positions so you can get that breadth of experience. So then when you graduate, you're going to have that background already. So then when you apply for kind of that next step, when you're applying for those supervisory positions, you're going to be a much better qualified candidate than the next person. But we also have kind of those office types of positions, whether you talk about human resources or whether you talk about accounting or the sales office. So in some of those positions, you do have, whether you call it a coordinator or administrator role. Those are the kind of titles that you're looking for. But I'll be honest with you, it's really tough in our industry to get into those positions, because a lot of times, for instance, we have our banquet department, because banquets typically we have a lot of students because they work Friday nights and Saturday nights. So perfect fit for students. So when that student graduates, and whether it be with a Bachelor of Commerce or whatever it is that they're taking, then they're hoping that there's going to be that opening, whether it be in human resources or accounting or marketing. And because we're a company that likes to promote from within, those are the people that we're going to, first of all, look at. And if they don't have the required experience or education, then we might look at an external candidate. So don't be afraid to take positions with companies where you feel that you might have a good fit with. Take something that may be that kind of opening position, get your foot in the door, and really impress, so then that way they'll consider you when that ideal position becomes available. You know, and we do also have internships. So, you know, that's another great opportunity to get your foot in the door and really show what you're able to do. So then, again, you're qualified because we know who you are, that we'll be looking at you for that full-time permanent position.
Name one thing that impresses you about a prospective employee in an interview and one thing that detracts from the individual in an interview.
Okay. So if it's okay, I'll mention a few things because it is hard to narrow it down to one. I would say that one thing that's true across, working with clients and working internally to hire for our firm is that someone who comes in with making the first impression right from the start. So a few things: showing up on time, actually showing up is very important. Missing an interview or thinking it was a different time is a really bad way to kind of get your foot off the ground, because then you really have to make up for that, and that can be really hard. And some might be more forgiving than others. So just make sure you're there, make sure you're on time, not too early, no earlier than 15 minutes early. So it's kind of a little bit of a science, but you want to not show up an hour early and then make the person feel like they have to see you right away or don't want to leave you waiting. So try to just think about the person who's interviewing you and put them in a position that they know that you're there and on time, but don't have to wait, but also don't feel pressured. So kind of that's before you even start the interview, but those things do matter. Showing up, in a professional way as well. So sometimes you wonder what to dress, but dressing a little too professional usually is less of an issue than not dressing professional enough. But you also want to gauge, depending on what the position is that you're applying for. If you're going to go into a construction site where everyone's wearing hard hat and boots and whatnot, they might be more of a casual environment than if you're in a professional services firm. So take it, consider those factors, but also kind of err on the side of more professionalism in the case of an interview. And also just showing up that way, but showing up prepared. Little things like coming with a notepad, even if you just lay it on the table with your pen, can just show that you're interested, you're engaged, you're expecting the conversation to have some value because you want to take some takeaways. So these are just little things that you can do that do get noticed. I've had interviews with clients and panels, and even myself when I'm interviewing with my colleagues, who will, the interviewee will come in and leave, and they'll be like, "Oh, did you notice they didn't bring a notepad?" Or little things like that, or that they had cat hair all over them or something like that. So people do notice, and there are things that kind of are distractions and points that you can get docked off before even saying anything at this point in an interview. I would also say that confidence is one thing, but it's also a fine line between confidence and kind of overconfidence and arrogance as well sometimes. So arrogance, I would say, would be on the top of my list of detraction from an interview, but confidence would be near the top of what I think is great in an interview. So managing that carefully. So coming in and shaking the hand and introducing yourself and making eye contact and sharing your experiences with them in a confident way, because you have been invited to interview for the position. So clearly there's something about your resume that captured their attention. So they want to hear about your experiences and your skills, and you deserve to be there because they've invited you and they wouldn't have otherwise. So therefore go in with confidence in your skills and the fact that they think you're fit for the job. So just keep that in the back of your mind. But also don't come in like you're all of that in a piece of cake either, because that can also rub the wrong way. So they want, typically people want those who are, eager and show that they're willing to learn and are kind of teachable and will come in and do the job that they're there to do and be listened to, management and be trained and be open to training and thankful for training. So I would say they're the things that, without even talking about words, I would say they're all things that matter, so that body language, that showing up on time, and all of those. In terms of what you're saying in an interview, just a couple of things that, again, is kind of general that you can apply to any interview is doing a bit of research. So if you've applied for a position, then you're interviewed for a position, and you come in, you should know what the company does, and you should know a little bit about what the role is and why you've applied. So you should have connected those dots. If you come in and ask a basic question, so what does your company do, or what exactly, is this role, which funny enough does happen far too often. So I think, doing a bit of background research and putting that out there, not too forcefully, but saying, I was attracted to this company because of the fact that you do X, Y, Z, and looks like there's growth potential in these areas, which is attractive to me because I have experience doing X, Y, Z. So showing and making those connections for them and showing that you understand the company and are really intrigued to work there and you have a reason for applying for the role. So a strong motivation and thinking about your motivation before you go in, because the question typically does get asked of why you want to work for the company, why you want to work in that role. So taking that one and nailing that one can really sometimes be a make or a break in an interview. And at the end, asking thoughtful questions. So at the end of an interview, you should always ask something. Never, especially if it's your first interaction, first conversation, and they ask you a lot of questions, and then they say, "What questions do you have for us?" It's not ideal to say, "Well, I don't have any questions," because again, it shows a little bit of disinterest, shows that you haven't critically thought about the role enough. So, coming prepared with a bank of questions in your mind, as some of them get answered along the way, you still have one left over that you can ask. Great. So bringing a thoughtful question to the table, I think, is important and gets noticed. So again, it kind of rubs the wrong way, an interviewer typically, if there's no questions. In terms of what detracts, again, I mentioned arrogance is a big thing for me personally and for a lot of others, I think, who interview, perhaps. You're nodding over here as well. So that's one thing. Again, late or not showing up is another thing. No notepads, kind of the reverse of everything I've already mentioned. Another big one is negativity. So, first thing, you kind of shake your hand and you're being brought into a room. So how's your day going? You say, "Oh, it's terrible, X, Y, Z." Even that is just, shows negativity. So say you're great. Say your day is going fantastic. Say it's a beautiful day. Like, be positive. It just sets the interview off to a much better start. If you say you're having a terrible day and X, Y, Z happened, even if it did, probably don't say that in your interview. Be positive in every aspect about your interview. Don't talk negatively about your degree or about your previous employer or where you currently are, about anything really. Don't be negative. If you have to, if there's ways of talking critically about, if you are at a current position, you want to move somewhere else, but make it more positive about that company and why you want to work there and what you want to gain, and not why you want to leave where you currently are. So trying to think positively and say positive things. And again, not asking questions gets noticed. And yeah, I would say those are my biggies.
And I'm going to echo a lot of what Shauna has already said. Definitely everything communicates. So when you're walking into that interview, when you have to ask for directions as to where you're going, I've had people who will go to the front desk to ask for the manager and be absolutely rude to our guest service agent. Guess what's going to happen? They're going to call and say, "Your interview is here," but boy, are they, and fill in the blank. And it's not a good blank, right? So all of that communicates. I've actually had people who have shown up with their buddy. So my buddy is my ride. And so do you introduce me to your buddy or to your mom? I've had a mom show up to an interview as well. Please don't do that, because again, everything communicates, and that tells me that you need some support. You're not going to be self-sufficient when I put you into a role. So that's going to be concerning for me when I see kind of those warning signs. Dress appropriately for the interview. I agree. Always overdress rather than underdress, because you can always dress it down. You know what? A lot of our positions, when you first start off in that hourly world, we have uniforms, but I still have people who will come in a suit and tie, and that's not necessary, but certainly for those people who are getting their start, but I know that they want to be a supervisor because maybe they are graduating from a hospitality program, then it's appropriate for them to be dressed so that they will eventually be that manager one day. Dress for the position you want to be, whether it's in the future. But on the flip side of that, if you're going for a construction worker job, then you probably don't want to dress in that suit and tie, because then all of a sudden they're going to make certain assumptions about you in terms of, does that person think that they're too good for this position? Look at the way they're dressed. So there is that fine line of dressing professional but not being too far, depending on the role. And again, depending on the position, I'm going to say bring a resume with you. So I've already talked about my online application system, and you know what? Sometimes you don't get all the information in there that you would prefer to share with us. So bring me a copy of your resume. It's probably going to be a heck of a lot easier to read. There's a whole lot more information in there that you can then point to and highlight to me that is applicable. And you know what? Sometimes we're so busy that maybe where you go, oh my gosh, forgot that I had this interview, and you're rushing to go and meet the candidate, and all of a sudden you don't have the resume. Or maybe there's multiple people that are going to meet with you, and they only have one copy of their resume. How nice is it that you're able to hand everybody a copy of your resume? Then everybody can be flipping through it at the same time. If you have any kind of backup information that, again, is applicable, feel free to bring it. And there certainly are people who kind of subscribe to the portfolios and, bring everything. I'm going to tell you, I'm not one of those people. I don't want to see your entire history, but certainly if there are some things that are significant, absolutely bring those along. And I agree, come with some questions that when you sit there and you say, I have absolutely no questions, that to me is a detractor. Or when I say, what do you know about my company? And I'm going to say about 95% of the time, I get not much. So that tells me that in today's world, that you couldn't spend the 5 minutes, because that's all it takes with the internet, just 5 quick minutes to Google my company, right? Again, that communicates volumes. And, so this is when I'm going to really age myself, because when I was a young student and I was out there looking for a job, I went to the library, so I had to get on the bus to go to the library. I had to then go to the card catalog. I had to look up the magazine. I had to go find the magazine. I had to go find microfiche. If anybody even knows what the heck that is, you had to be really committed to doing that research when I was young. Now it's super easy. So there's absolutely no excuse for saying, I don't know much about your company. And I agree that sometimes we'll be doing the interview and all of a sudden the person will say, yeah, and by the way, what's the role that I'm interviewing for? If you're not sure about the role when the company calls, because legitimately maybe you apply for multiple positions, okay? Because we have that capability within our online application system. You can apply to be a guest service agent, but what other positions are you interested in? What other hotels are you interested in? We ask all of those questions. So legitimately, you could have been open to almost anything. So when that person calls to invite you in for an interview, can you just remind me, because if I say it's Newcastle Hotels and Resorts, we have 7 properties in Canada. So which property is it that I would be interviewing for? And what is the position? It's okay to ask that question when they call you, but not so good when you're in the middle of the interview. And one of the things that was already mentioned is that if you have a bad experience with a previous employer, don't tell me about it in the interview. You know, I've had some people say, oh my gosh, my manager was absolutely horrible. This company, I don't know how they survived, their management practices, and that all may be true. But what are you going to say about my company if you're employed with me and you leave? We all know that we're not perfect. We're anything but. There always will be opportunities, but what are you going to tell others when you leave my employment? That's one of the concerns I'm going to have. And one of the questions that I'm going to say shy away from unless they bring it up first is, so what is the rate of pay for this position? Because then what you're communicating to me is you're more focused on the pay than the experience. Make it more about the experience and what opportunities are there, what learning opportunities and growth position opportunities, rather than about the pay.
What kind of opportunities, paid or otherwise, would you most strongly recommend for students looking for relevant experience outside the classroom?
So as I mentioned earlier, I think that extracurricular activities are huge. And your university career, I know when I was in university, you feel very busy, especially if you're dedicated to your studies and you want to do really well, and so you kind of be focused and put your 110% into your studies. But if I had my time back, I think something I would have told myself would be to be a little bit more involved in, especially my undergraduate degree. During my master's degree, I was very involved in everything because I learned from my undergraduate degree. But I would say that getting involved in your university, so your student clubs, student government, student union, whether it's the Indigenous Society or, the Business Tourism Society or whatever it may be, there's a lot of different ways. And I did take a quick look at Mount St. Vincent just to make sure you guys actually have those things, and you do. So take advantage of getting involved while you can. I know you're busy, but it does add value to your application. And whether you have a 3.3 GPA or a 4.0, companies don't always know that, but if they will see what you were involved in when you were in school. So that's on your resume. Your GPA is not always, and sometimes it's not asked for. So as long as you get your degree, do well. I'm not saying drop your studies and go volunteer, but trying to find some balance if you can. I think is, it does add value from my perspective for sure. So that's kind of in the university itself. There's tons of ways to get involved, and university is very understanding of kind of your work schedule as well. So it's a great place to take up some of those opportunities. But also, external in your community, volunteering that way, it's, equal, great experience to have. So being a member on a board, Fusion Halifax, I'm a big advocate for. I sat on the board for 2 years there, and it's a great organization, and it's all about young people and making a difference in the community. So if you haven't checked that out, I definitely would, and maybe attend some of their events and get to know and network with new people. So making connections, being engaged in your university or external community, volunteering, I think those things are really huge. And again, they add to that toolbox that I mentioned. So when I sat on the board, I got to manage a team of 25 volunteers. I got to run a mentorship program. I got to host and coordinate professional development workshops. I got to have experience, coordinating and event planning. So, and then sitting on a board, learning board governance structure and those relationships. So it's, you gain a lot from your toolbox from those external opportunities. So yes, studies are very important, but kind of while you're doing your studies, I think there is room for those elements as well. So I would say that that would be what I would recommend.
And what I would say is that, not everybody is able to have a part-time job. But if you're able to, try and get into the industry that you're hoping to eventually go into. So if you talk about my industry, come and be a part-time banquet server. And maybe that's not where you want to be. Maybe you want to be a guest service manager. But to have that experience in the hotel, you're going to understand about our world. And that's going to get you credits for when you apply for that guest service manager role. So where you can do that. There's lots of co-op opportunities, and I'm going to say everywhere. There's lots of companies that love to support students. And so some of those opportunities are going to be paid opportunities, and some are going to be unpaid opportunities. Again, recognizing that not everybody is going to be able to take an unpaid opportunity, because then how do you pay for your schooling the next year? That was the world I was in. So I was always lucky enough that I managed to find a paid opportunity in human resources. So, and it didn't matter to me what specifically it was. I had one year where it was salary and benefits administrator. I learned very quickly I didn't want to specialize in salary and benefits. I did recruitment one year. You know what? That was really interesting. I did training another year, really interesting. And so I started to kind of build my portfolio with these smaller positions. And then, so when I was applying for an HR generalist position, even though I didn't have that as a role in my background, because I had all these different components of HR from all these different roles, suddenly I was a better candidate because I had these little pieces that I could put together. So that's certainly one piece of advice I would give. And if you have the ability to do kind of an unpaid internship, there are definitely companies out there who are absolutely lean and mean, would love to have the extra assistance. So if you have that capability to do so, and even if it is for 4 weeks on a part-time basis, to be able to put that on your resume, again, you have that experience compared to the next person who just has the education. So when I'm reviewing those resumes, I'm going to choose that person who, even if it's just a 4-week co-op or internship, I'm going to choose them for an interview over somebody else. Makes a huge difference. Again, those other activities that you do, that can help us understand kind of what other skills that you might have. That if you're in a club of some sort, if you have some sort of position that you hold, that if you're the president or vice president, if you're the treasurer, again, it shows us you're going to go above and beyond, but then it's also going to show us some of the leadership skills that you bring to the table. When you have positions, the other thing that I'm going to say is volunteer for things within your organization. Again, it may not be a paid opportunity, and it may not be your passion, but volunteer to sit on the Health and Safety Committee. Again, it's going to give extra background to you. If they're looking for volunteers for anything, at one point we were looking for volunteers as we were revamping kind of our recruitment process and kind of the messaging that we would have with our students. And so in a venue like this, I said, hey, I'm looking for volunteers to come in, be part of a focus group, give us some feedback. And I had a couple of people that volunteered. And one of those people we ended up hiring because of how much she impressed us when she came in for that focus group. One of the things that you'll quickly learn about the Maritimes is that it is such a tight-knit community, small community. I come from Vancouver. So in Vancouver, you are literally a number. There's so many people there that if you say, hey, do you know so-and-so? You're more likely to get a, sorry, I don't. Here in the Maritimes, you'll probably get, yeah, I know that person, or I know somebody who knows that person. And we can easily get kind of that off-the-record reference about you. So do those networking things, be involved, and that will help you immensely.
Where do you see opportunities for jobs in the next 10 years? So your answer could be geographic locations, industry sectors, or specific jobs.
Okay. I find this one a little difficult, I guess. It's hard to predict the future, but I guess going with what we know, the unemployment rate is recently announced that it's been the lowest it's been in 40 years since the 1970s. So in recruitment, we call it kind of a war for talent, because it's, you're competing against a lot of other companies too for talent, and especially, that has its own challenges, and like you said, the Maritimes, when it's small, and especially if you want to find someone locally, and versus somewhere from away, which can be hard to recruit and have people relocate. But of course, with the baby boomer generation and retirements happening, positions in healthcare, LPNs, nurses, especially, twofold. So those that are in those positions that are retiring, which would need to be filled, and those that need to be cared for because of the aging population. So I think healthcare, of course, technology is huge and booming. So careers in tech, whether it be software design, engineer, those sorts of roles, I think, will be another area and are an area that are kind of hot right now in the market, and will continue to be. And of course, with the war for talent, recruitment roles, if anyone's interested in recruitment, especially in those sort of areas. So like tech recruiters, a lot of people specialize in recruitment. So IT recruiting, tech recruiting would be another area to help, again, with that talent, securing and searching for tech talent, which can be hard when there's so many opportunities out there and you're competing for a limited number of strong candidates as well for that. So I would say there are kind of the areas that came to my mind, again, based on what I'm seeing, and the nature of kind of how our society is aging, so kind of thinking about it in that way. But at the same time, like, I don't necessarily think that I wouldn't necessarily advise to say, like, oh, well, therefore I need to be a LPN or a nurse, or I need to all of a sudden start changing my path and be a software engineer. I think, if you, again, stand out above the rest in your own way, and again, have those internship opportunities, be confident, bring your notepad, show up on time, do all of the things that you should be doing, and following what your passion is in your career, and growing your toolbox, and whether it's a growing industry or not, I think focusing on what is important to you is important, but keeping in mind what those jobs are, but not necessarily limiting yourself to those.
The positive thing is there are absolutely opportunities in tourism. That tourism continues to grow, and when you take a look at hotels that continue to be built, that means that there are going to be more opportunities, and this is across Canada. And so the interesting thing is, when you talk about our unemployment rate, that talks about the people who are looking for jobs, but honestly, we can't fill all the positions that we have. So what are we going to do? So part of that is, we have, I think many companies now are working with individuals who are international students and helping them with paperwork. People are coming from abroad. So although our unemployment rates are low, there are huge opportunities out there. And our industry is absolutely one of them. That when I talk about kind of the supervisory level, it is really difficult for us right now to find, whether it be that guest service manager or supervisor or housekeeping supervisor, or food and beverage supervisor. That breadth of experience just isn't there to the same level that it used to be. It's difficult to find people, and so now what tends to happen is that we will recruit from afar, and whether that means we're across Canada, we're putting out the postings, and so most recently we have hired an outlet manager, and he's coming to us from Toronto. because we couldn't find somebody that was a really good fit from the area. So, the interesting thing is that happens all over the place. A lot of our seasonal resort properties, again, some huge opportunities in terms of those entry-level management positions, because they are seasonal, and then again, you have that under your belt, so then when you're applying for a permanent position, then you have that experience over somebody else. So certainly don't exclude those seasonal or summer opportunities, because you say, well, it's only for a certain period of time. That's where sometimes you're going to get an opportunity that you will never find in Halifax. That in my world, people want to, for instance, be an event coordinator. They want to get into event management. That is one of the toughest positions in hospitality to get into. And so sometimes, though, you can get it at a seasonal summer property, and then suddenly you pop way above everybody else. So definitely hospitality, absolutely growing, and still huge opportunities in terms of where there will be opportunities, because again, the aging workforce. So when we look at our regional team, the large majority of us are all in our 50s. And so that means that we're all going to retire at roughly the same time. And so again, that creates opportunities for people.
What skills that are not learned in school are the most helpful for this career? So this could be stuff such as empathy, leadership skills, social skills, time management skills, that sort of thing. The list goes on.
Great. So I think I will say a few ideas, but I think a lot of these skills you do learn in school, or at least you have an opportunity to learn in school if you take advantage of those opportunities. So things such as time management obviously is very important depending on most roles that you're in. But in my role, for example, I've managed multiple different clients and projects and members of my own team. So managing my time and project managing is very important. But in school, if I were to reflect back, kind of managing all of your courses and making sure you're studying for each of those, and again, if you're volunteering and managing those aspects as well as you're learning project management. So I think just thinking about how you can translate that to the workforce is important. But I would say time management, project management is a key one for a lot of positions. Communications and interpersonal skills is a huge one, of course, and again, many careers that most of you will undertake. So again, the more you can get out, network, get involved, and practice your skills and networking and introducing yourself and sharing your skills and presenting or having opportunities to do maybe debate club or Toastmasters type of style and presentations, I think is really great to be able to articulate your thoughts, and that's important right from the start, right from an interview process, and being able to communicate your skills right through to the workplace, being able to communicate verbally and written as well, which again, written communication is something, of course, you gain a lot in school as well. And in general, in terms of other soft skills, coming back to not being negative, positive, being really positive, I think is really, really important, and one thing that we value most in our firm. If you have a positive attitude and take on work tasks that are assigned and do them with energy and determination and solving the task and being thankful for learning opportunities and absorbing all of that as much as possible and just kind of driving forward, it really gets noticed. So again, positivity is just something to keep in mind. It's not necessarily something you learn from somewhere. It's just a framework of thinking and acting. So I think that's important in the workplace as well. And nobody likes that negative Nancy kind of going around the halls and complaining about everything. It's draining to be around. So positive, people like working with positive people who are holding their own weight and helping others on the teamwork, collaboration, those things as well. Again, which you can and do learn in school, but all things that are important in the workplace. So thinking about how what you're learning translates and how you can continue to gain those skills, again, through whether it be internships or extracurricular activities and volunteer work as well.
So although it's not a skill, I'm going to say the biggest thing that we're looking for is your attitude. And attitude communicates in the interview. And so when we have someone who has a great, positive, enthusiastic personality, that's the individual we're going to choose. Because we can teach you about the specifics of the job, but if you don't have a great attitude, we can't change that. You know, it's just like I always say, if you're not somebody who will naturally smile, I'm not going to be able to change that either. So if you bring that great attitude, then we're going to choose you because it will permeate into everything else that you do. So that's the biggest thing for me. And so the second component I'm going to say with that attitude is the communication. That if you're a good communicator, and because you know what, there are always going to be challenges. You know, and when in my industry, the number of guests that are maybe not happy with something, and to be able to communicate appropriately with those individuals, to be able to communicate appropriately with your management team members, again, that will help elevate you a lot faster.
What's the top advice you could share with a student at the start of their career?
So I would say, again, coming back to knowing what your own passions and values are and what it is you want to do, and taking that time to invest into that. But at the same time, it's okay if you don't necessarily know where you're going. And I know I was in that boat, and it caused me a lot of anxiety because I said, I have no idea what I'm meant to do, what I'm supposed to do, and what I want to do. And there's just so many things I want to try. So kind of thinking of that toolbox and taking it step by step, which comes to the next point of being patient, because you might have an ideal of where you want to be, but there is a ladder, so they say, that there's, you know, it's not necessarily a straightforward ladder that you climb, but you do have to start somewhere. So being patient and knowing that you're kind of gaining the skills and that your time will come where you'll get where you want to be, and provided you have that positive attitude, put in the work, and do good at what you're doing, people notice, and you'll progress in your companies that you're currently in, or you'll gain skills and positive references to move elsewhere. So I think having patience, sometimes we can be very eager and have a reputation as millennials to be very eager in our careers and want to advance and want to get there sooner rather than later. So having that patience, and that's also gets noticed by employers. If you come in too strongly, and yes, they want to hear that you want to grow in their firm, but they also want to know that you're going to be in the role and satisfied in the role, and commit to the role that you're there to do, and pay your dues and work your way up when the time is right for them and for you. So coming in a little too strong and saying, like, when can I advance? Like, am I here long enough? Can I get to the next role now? And just, I know, it happens. It happens, and I think it's important to be persistent and to, you know, to drive your career forward and take that into your own hands, but also have patience. So again, another balance factor, I would say. And connections, like grow your connections as much as possible while you're at university, while you're here, with your professors, with the clubs, with the societies, with the networking events that you go through. Here at these kind of events, you know, talking to the panelists, and happy to talk with anyone afterwards if you guys have time. So taking opportunities like that to build those connections, because everyone that you meet, you just really never know how one thing's going to lead to another. And so treating all of the interactions that you do have very positively, and making an impression, because you never know, that person could be in a position to hire you down the road, or someone might know you who's in a hiring position. So not necessarily it's all about that, but you know, positive connections is important, because you just it's just a good human thing to do as well.
So definitely I would say bring that great attitude, volunteer for things within your organization, whether it be in your specific role, or whether it be in the health and safety or social committees, who knows what opportunities there are. But by doing that, it really will show the company that you're investing in yourself, that you want to move ahead. And I agree, don't be too anxious for that next opportunity. That we definitely have had some people who have said, listen, I've been a supervisor for all of 6 months, so now I think I can be a front office manager. And they apply and they actually get that opportunity. So you know what? Those types of things can happen 100%, especially when you talk about a labor shortage, right? But is that going to be the right fit for you? For me, I would say look for companies that are going to help you grow, and you know that they're going to invest in you long term as well. Rather than that short-term fix of, okay, there's that next step, so I'm going to go for that company. And now that I've been there for a whopping 6 months, I see there is another opportunity, so I'm going to go there as well. And then all of a sudden, when somebody looks at your history, they go, wow, they've been to a lot of different positions in a very short time. And sometimes even though you're progressing, that still is a red flag. Because then it becomes, how long are you going to stay with me? Are you going to invest the whopping 6 months? And really, in a 6-month time frame, you're not even fully up to speed in your position as of yet. So I'm probably, even though I may be impressed with you, I may not choose you for that particular position. So I'm going to say think a little bit long term in terms of the companies that you approach and the relationships that you want to build, but definitely network, network, network in the Maritimes. So many times the position that you get is because you have met someone at something like this, or I know of a position that I suddenly say, I met someone, they would be fantastic, I recommend you. That is the way in the Maritimes, so much more than in a big city. So even if it's not your comfort level, get out there and meet people.
Great. That's all the questions we have for the panel. Is there any questions from the audience? If you do, make sure to speak loud and clear. Yeah, Allison.
Yeah, so for me, if it's the same organization, then that's a positive because they see the value in you. And so even though it's a contract term, that they're bringing you back. And so one of the things that I would suggest is if you have short time frames, maybe, unless it's because it's the summer, because in that case, we know you're a student and we can hopefully figure out that this was your summer position. Right? But other than that, what I will tell people sometimes to do is explain why you left. Or if you have a gap in your employment, if you decided to stay home because you had young kids, you decided to go to Europe and travel for a year, put that on there, because otherwise I'm going to say, what happened to that year? Where did it go? So definitely if it's within the same company, I'm going to look at that as a positive, that they keep wanting you back.
So I would echo that as well. So especially if it's progression, then that shows that they've promoted you and see value in what you bring. But at the same time, if it's a university, I remember when I was in university and they called them like USAP positions. So like you do research with some professor and then research with another, and sometimes you do them at the same time, and teaching assistant positions, running labs and so forth. So all of those things are kind of a combination of skills, especially in university. I don't think it impacts you negatively whatsoever. I think it's all very positive. I think it's more so for different companies. So if you are at the Westin for a year and then you go to Prince George for a year and then you go to another hotel for a year. So it's that jumpiness for especially 1 to 2 year terms that leads to a question mark that you'll certainly get asked about. So if it's not directly on your resume, then definitely the question will come up and you'll want to be able to speak to that. So, ideally, 4-5 years in a position, and then you move again, you're probably less so to get questioned, because 4 to 5 years in a position, you know, you've been there long enough to make some ground and to show that you kind of, there could be some good logic of why you moved on at that point. But moving every year to 2 definitely is a flag. It's not to say you won't be able to ever get a job again, of course, but it's something that I always notice in a resume and that I always ask about. And but I think what you're doing is great, so keep it up.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Just because in the last time we had the session, cell phones in an interview in April at the time addressed it. I'd just like to, for perspective on what to do and what not to do, because it was an issue last time.
Yeah, so I would say putting your cell phone away is a definite guideline to follow. So having your cell phone off too, the ringer off, so it's not ringing, and during an interview then you gotta be all stressed out, going through your purse or through your jacket to try to turn it off. And I've had people try to continue answering the question while they're turning it off, and I can't listen to what they're saying because I'm just so distracted by, oh, did they find it yet? What's going on? And where's the phone? And so, you know, it's a distraction. It's not to say that it, you know, will cost you in getting the interview, but it is something that I would definitely recommend not to happen. Same thing with like just reminding me, like if you're checking your watch or kind of distracted looking around the room or looking at the clock, or if your phone is there, you're looking at this and like, oh, are you in a rush or something? Am I interfering with your time? So, you know, having that eye contact and being in the room, being engaged, being present, sitting up, kind of leaning forward, mimicking somewhat their body language, which is human nature anyways, but not having a phone I think is great, or anything that would indicate some sort of distraction or cause a distraction.
Yeah, I've actually had somebody whose phone rang and then said, do you mind if I answer this call? Guess what, maybe I'm not going to end the interview right then and there. I'll still converse with you for a little bit, but your chances have just absolutely gone to 0 for that position.
I guess unless, like if your mother's in the hospital and she's in critical illness or something like that, then, you know, if there's an extreme case, so this would be very rare to be the case because you're probably with your mother if this is the case and not interviewing for jobs. But maybe say that at the beginning of the interview, like, I have my cell phone on, I'm just going to leave it here because of X, Y, Z, and I don't suspect it'll be an issue, but if I do, I apologize in advance. So just kind of preemptively foreseeing that. But again, that'll be a really rare circumstance and it's probably you know, not applicable. But if you absolutely had to have your cell phone, like, just explain why it might ring, and if so, why you might have to answer it in that case.
Question from anyone else? Yeah.
Are all degrees created equal? So would you value a Bachelor of Commerce over a BA in a business-related field, or would you value a Bachelor in Tourism and Hospitality over a Bachelor's of Administration? And does the school you completed in matter?
For me, I would say it really depends on the position that you're applying for. You know, obviously, if you're applying for whether we say HR or accounting, then the Bachelor of Commerce is more applicable. So I might give it more weight. But if you're, you know, looking at kind of in the operations, then I would probably weight the tourism hospitality programs a little bit heavier because, you know, you've already shown your interest in the operational side of the business. So there's a better fit there, you know, but if we say that somebody has a science degree, you know, how would I look upon them compared to everybody else? And I guess in one sense I would be a little bit concerned because if someone's going through a science degree, if they have physics, for instance, what do I have to offer them that's going to keep them engaged and happy at my workplace? And for me, I don't think that I have enough there. So I probably wouldn't even bring them in because I just don't see that the fit is going to be there.
So I would say the same. It depends. And if I think of my background and the recruiters that work with me, we have some that have bachelor's, some right up through PhDs, and some are in history, some are in psychology, some are in commerce, some are society, like science. So it really is across this spectrum. So some roles it matters a little less, and more so kind of that positive attitude and the extracurricular experience and all those things matter, as long as kind of you have, again, a good motivation for why you want to work there. If you do have an engineer degree or a law degree or something that's a bit more specialized, and why are you applying to be a recruiter? And again, similarly, is someone with a law degree going to be satisfied in the recruitment position if it's not related to their career? So those are kind of some of the reasons, because we want to make sure that you would be engaged, and if you have a really good reason, kind of sharing your compelling motivation for why it is that you want to make the change, I think would be important. So if you were to interview that physics person and say, well, I'm actually really interested because I did this physics project and led me to this place, and I really got interested in tourism. So, and then be like, oh, okay, and then that kind of concern is gone. And then, yeah, so obviously some positions, if you want to be an engineer, you can't really do that with a psychology degree. So those are kind of obvious cases. But in more kind of office roles or positions such as that, you know, the business can be applicable. But if you have, especially if you gain some sort of experience throughout your career, whether it be internships or that volunteer experience that you might have, that can add some sense to it. So it's more so like, does this make sense for this person, I would say, and for them to work with us in our firm. So yeah. Does that answer your question? Kind of. Is there something more specific?
You know, applying for something with an unrelated degree,
Yeah.
or related to related degrees. So Bachelor of Commerce is
Yeah.
very relatable to a Bachelor of Business and
Right.
Bachelor of Administration, but gives one even more weight than another for a job that they both relate to.
I would say no. I mean, certain companies, like I know Deloitte, whenever they advertise, they're like, need an MBA, like they're just like, need MBA, and they will consider those without, but they are very specific in what they indicate they want. But for the most part, I would say something that's really aligned, if it's tourism versus, you know, hospitality, I don't know, they're probably all one and the same, but, you know, I would say I can't think of an instance where it would, you know, negatively impact you to have commerce versus the BA. Yeah.
And what I would say is, as long as the programs, whatever they are, cover kind of the core requirements of my position, so whether it, you know, no matter what it's called or where it's from, I'm going to still be interested in that candidate because they have the minimum educational requirements. And then I'm going to bring you in, and then you're hopefully going to impress me, because then I'm really saying, the person has the minimum kind of skills that can do the job. Now I'm looking for fit, and now I'm looking for promotability for the future. So for me, even though it may be multiple degrees or multiple universities, I will still kind of treat them equally and bring the candidate in because I know they've got the minimum to do the job.
Yep. Yep, so we are officially out of time now. So thank you to everybody for coming to this panel, and a big thank you to our panelists.